So Scott, welcome to the Whole Man Academy podcast number 2. How are we?
Very good, thank you, Ant. Very good.
Good. This comes to us in strange times, because usually we would be close by each other, hopefully recording this. But we know with what's going on in the world at the moment that we're not self-isolating, but we are keeping our distance for everybody.
Yeah, being careful and sensible about things.
Sensible. Yeah. And very quickly, I mean, the guys that are involved with the Whole Man Academy and have been following us will know that you're part of our team anyway. But amazingly, you're more than just part of our team and our creative director. And to run through a few questions first, what is a guy from Lanark in Scotland doing down here?
That was to do with women. I moved to London about 12 years ago for work, and I met my partner Samantha, and we stayed in Wapping for a little while together in a lovely place called Vinegar Street, which is a lovely part of London. But then we decided to have children. So Samantha's now late father lived in Wiltshire, and my children from my first marriage lived in Cheshire. So we drew a line, and in the middle-ish was the Cotswolds. And I'd heard of the Cotswolds, but I'd never been. I'd been to Woodstock once to the, I think it's the Black Bear pub hotel. That's how we ended up. That's how we ended up here.
Okay. And what would you say? I mean, I know you've got a great story about when you was it when you were at university and you were serving ice creams.
Well, that was when I was at school, actually. Yeah, that's an interesting question to start this with. Yeah, my first job was with an ice cream van in a place called Carluke, which is a grubby little town outside Glasgow. It's grubby, but it's okay. Yeah. And got a job in an ice cream van, and I was a bit curious as to why people were paying £10 for an ice cream. And bearing in mind this is nearly 30 years ago, it was a bit odd. It turned out that the chap who was running the ice cream van was selling, should we say, certain psychoactive substances from the van, and he was stuffing little bits of marijuana or whatever inside the ice cream cones. And so I was a sort of ignorant drug dealer. I had no idea I was an ice cream drug dealer.
Innocent drug dealer.
Yeah, I found out, and I didn't last much longer after that because it wasn't really my thing. Yeah.
I always think that's
funny.
A classic story. And for you now, you've developed. I know you've got such a random background. Kind of, most people maybe stick with one career path, but for yourself, I know on your intro you've got not only a public speaker doing keynote talks, but a business consultant, HR director. But actually, one of them I think which stands out for me is research scientist. And where did you start with that?
Well, that was, I went to university in Edinburgh and I studied biology and psychology, and I had aspirations of being David Attenborough. And at the end of that, I tried to get into the scientific world, which was actually quite difficult. Things have changed, actually. We could maybe come back to that. But and I eventually, I was actually working, believe it or not, I was working in a kilt maker on Princess Street in Edinburgh. Only job I could get, and of course, knowing about science qualifies you beautifully to be a kilt maker. But one day, there's a paper up there in Edinburgh called the Evening News, and I was looking through the job section. I always did every, I think it was a Thursday. I might be wrong, but I think it was a Thursday. And I saw this little ad saying a research assistant required, University of Edinburgh Pathology Department. So I called the number, and the next day I got another call saying, "Oh, could you come in for an interview today?" And I was like, "Okay." So I asked my boss, Mrs. McAlpine was her name, can't forget her, and if I could go for an interview. So I had the full gear on. I had the Prince Charlie jacket and the kilt on. I went up to an interview in the pathology department, and I walked into the room, and professor there, Professor Dougal Gardner was his name, took one look at me, and if any Scottish people are listening to this who know about tartan will know that the Gardner name wears a particular type of tartan called Lindsay. And I had the Lindsay tartan kilt on, so I got the job. And I think I got the job because of the kilt rather than because of what my degree was. But anyway, that's how I got into be a research scientist, and I spent 3.5 years then researching arthritis, researching Alzheimer's disease. I did 127 partial autopsies. I did 50 brain biopsies. So yeah, very interesting time in my life. Very interesting.
And how do you think that has helped you with your public speaking?
Well, it did a bit. I mean, it did hugely, because I mean, I ended up in my second year there Professor Gardner called me into the office and he said, look, I'd like you to go and teach medical students college and chemistry. And I had never been on my feet. I'd done, the usual sort of university thing. I had stood up and presented to 10 students or whatever, but I'd never been in a lecture theatre, and I'd certainly never taught people. This was terrifying, because I couldn't say no to Dole. He wasn't the sort of man you could say no to. So I ended up going into this lecture theatre, and if people listening to this can imagine the sort of classic Frankenstein's monster film where the theatres, these round theatres, lecture theatres with a little
looking down,
exactly, with a little desk in the middle. Well, I had to stand there and lecture these poor students who, bear in mind, were the same age as me. So I would be 23 at the time. So they were all basically the same age as me. I had to teach them college and chemistry. And the weird thing was, I wasn't worried about the content. I kind of knew about college and chemistry, and I could teach it, and I was, I had the technical capability, but I'd never spoken to an audience before. And if I'm absolutely honest, those 8 weeks were 8 of the toughest weeks for the students. They were horrendous for me. And I remember finishing and be very relieved. But then I got a call from the professor saying, "Could you come and see me?" And I, of course, thought, this man had a reputation. He was quite tough. He was fair, but he was also quite a hard chap. He was very determined and very focused on making sure he did the best for the patients that we were looking after. And I thought he was going to sack me. And I walked into his office, and he said to me, "Okay, how did it go?" And I said, "Well, it was awful. I never want to be on my feet again." And he sort of said, "Sit down." So I sat down, and he said, "Well, look, tell you what, give yourself a grade." And I just said, "Nah." He said, "No, please give yourself a grade." He called me McArthur. He never called me Scott. He said, "Right, McArthur, give yourself a grade." So I said, "Right, well, how?" He said, "Well, A to F." I went, "Okay, F." I failed. I never want to do it again. It was awful for the students and terrible for me. And he looked at me and he said, "Okay, can I give you a grade back?" And I said, "Okay." And he just said, "Nothing." And I was like, "What's he doing?" And he paused, and I thought, "Oh God, he's going to sack me." He said, "No, but I'll give you a not yet." And I was like, and I'm sure the listeners are thinking, "What's that about?" And I was the same. I thought, "What's he talking about?" The first thing was a bit like my kids. I went, "Yes, he's not sacked me."
Yeah.
But what he was doing, obviously, was giving me a chance. He was saying to me that, there's maybe something in there that you could do with your life. And then, believe it or not, 4 years ago, so this story, if I'm again absolutely honestly, it kind of disappeared into the sort of the mists of my autobiography, and I forgot about it really. But 4 years ago, I did my first TEDx talk in Warwick in front of 3,000 people, and he couldn't come because he was in his 90s. And but I sent him the video, and I said, "Look, I hope you enjoy watching this." Googled, because he then became a friend rather than being my boss. He was like a mentor to me. And a couple of weeks later, he invited me up to Edinburgh, to the Surgeons' Hall, which is a very famous building in Edinburgh, where all they keep all the bodies from the Crimean War and everything in there. It's an amazing, quite scary place. But he invited me up there, and next door to there's a hotel where all the medics and professors go for lunch, etc. So I went in there, and there he was sitting. His son David was there, and he asked me to sit down, and we took some pictures. And almost the first thing he said to me was, he leant forward and he said, "Give yourself a grade." I was like, "Oh," I said, "No way," and I swore at him. And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, can I give you a grade?" I went, "Aye, okay, on you go, prof." And he went, "I'll give you an A." I was like, "Yes." had finally got approval from the professor, but then he did something that he frequently did. He put his glasses on the end of his nose and he leant into me and he said, "But," and he was just sending me a signal that, you know, I'm so grateful. So it's a very long answer to the question, but I think he was the guy that spotted in me that I could do a job on my feet, and I could be a, you know, a professional speaker. And he passed about 9-10 months ago, it was a very sad. He was 93, I think. He had a very good and full life, but I will never forget him, because he was the guy who gave me that, you know, that not yet and but, which I now you know, use in my professional speaking career.
I guess if you linked it back to the Whole Man Academy, is we're always trying to find lessons in here, and you know, that one for me, what stands out is it's constant and never-ending improvement.
Yeah, and I think, and again, I mean, it's easy with hindsight, but I mean, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this over particularly the last 2 years, and it reminds me of a quote from a famous British educationalist called Ken Robinson, and Ken said this. He said, "Human resources are a bit like natural resources. Sometimes you've got to dig deep to find them. Human resources are like natural resources. Sometimes you've got to dig deep to find them." And I think that, to me, that means we need the Whole Man Academy. What we're doing is we're giving people the tools so they can dig deep to find, you know, what might be in them, what they could maybe, we could help them discover about themselves or make clearer about themselves. So I think there is a link. Yeah, there is a link.
Do you think that, I guess going back to, you know, your two biggest, let's say, talks are actually your TED Talks. Which, even at the moment, one of them is kind of mildly trending and is up to, you know, 6,000 plus views, which is pretty decent. Do you think that's now with the development of YouTube and all the social media, is that for you the biggest platform to be on now, is getting onto your YouTubes to deliver a message for the Whole Man Academy and for the public talks you do?
I think it is. I mean, the trends are that everything's video, you know, and I think that's why we've got, you know, YouTube is now the second biggest search engine in the world after Google, ironically now owned by Google, but it's, you know, it's a big search engine. You can see it with emergent technologies like TikTok, which is just video. So I think video is very important. I mean, it doesn't meet everyone's needs. So, for example, I also work with journalists quite a lot, and they hate video. They don't want video. You know, they want you to put bullet points, very clear. This is what I can offer. This is what I'm talking about. So there are still obviously mediums that prefer the written word or the spoken word, like what we're doing today in a podcast, because podcasts are also extremely popular and on a hugely steep curve. But I think video, certainly for me, for the next, it's difficult to predict, but 2 or 3 years, I would imagine video is going to be basically all I do is video. It's so important.
Well, let's talk about that, because for both of us, we know, you know, especially at the Whole Man Academy, where firstly, you know, we have that understanding that we're going to get thrown challenges in life, and you know, you learn from them and move on. But I'm a good example for us. We were planning to do these podcasts always face to face. Yeah. Recent developments, that's just out the window now. So I guess for us, it's about actually still helping to deliver content for guys to help them with you know, their mindset and resilience. But of course now, you know, things haven't run smoothly, and we're just adapting to what we can do. Yeah. So how do you, with the public talks that you do, is that mean that you're now developing, kind of moving further on to trying to get more stuff online, just because it's become learning at a distance for everybody?
Yeah, I think we're in with quite a few things. We're in an interim phase. We're in what I call a threshold moment. The coronavirus has made us all have it's an existential crisis where we're concerned about it, and we're being in many ways forced, you know, to stay at home and to self-isolate, and that means, of course, for the economy to keep going, we're going to go online, and we're going to look at ways of continuing our businesses, and that's what I'm doing. I mean, I've signed up to Zoom. I'm looking at other platforms with providers, and I'm hoping and predicting that, you know, companies will start to come towards me and ask me for help on the video format. And fortunately, I'm quite experienced in making, many documentaries. I do a series called Moments in Time, which the Homeman Academy is affiliated with, and that's all fine. But what I think actually will happen is in 6 months to a year or whenever we have the relaxing of the current circumstances across the world, is that we will substantially return to face, because we are group animals. We do not, biologically we are made to be with other people. It's part of what makes us what we are.
Yeah.
But what will be left, and I think this is potentially a very positive thing. What will be left is many, many more people, millions of people who are much more familiar with what the technology can do. And so you will have an impact, I think, a lasting impact on travel, a lasting impact on meeting structures and meeting design and using technologies. You're also going to have all these technology companies who have been out there selling these products are going to get an awful lot of feedback in the next few weeks from people that don't normally use it. So those technology companies, this is going to be a threshold moment for them as well. I mean, at the moment, they're all enjoying having a peak, a blip in their sales, and good for them. That I have no issue with that. But what they will find is over the next few weeks, they will get feedback from people saying, well, do you know what? That's too complex, or is that really value for money? Or they will get lots of feedback. So I think the outcome will be better online communication, better ways of talking to people like what we are doing today.
Yeah.
But also we will have a returned understanding of the importance of the face-to-face meeting, because despite what anyone will say, and there's a lot of people, I think there's a lot of BS out there about how this can replace face-to-face. No, it can't. It can augment it, and it can plug a gap when there's an existential crisis. So I think that's what's going to happen, man.
Do you think, I know from a previous experience I had where I wasn't allowed to do any sport for 6 months, and then when I was allowed to go back to it, I appreciated it, tenfold, because it'd been taken away from me. And I do wonder whether, for a lot of us, because we're facing, even if you haven't got the virus, you're basically at home on your own for a lot of people, that will the outcome be that we actually appreciate more the face-to-face, and maybe it's the spending time with family instead of relying on technology if distance isn't the barrier?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's again, predicting the future is never that easy a thing to do, but that old Prince song, Party Like It's 1999?
Yeah.
I think they'll be talking about party like it was in 2021, honestly, because we're going to suddenly all come back together again and realise, you're right, the value of being in a group and being together, and how wonderful and how beautiful that is.
Yeah, maybe we'll all appreciate it a bit more, and say maybe it's that you rely less on technology, or actually just make more of an effort to spend time with the people if they're close to you. And going back to the Homeman Academy, we started it back in 2018, and you were at the very first event, so you've been there from the very start. But with your role as creative director, where do you see yourself adding value for the people that are following the Homeman Academy?
Okay, well, I mean, I've worked in organisations, over 300 organisations for the last 20 years. And my job has fundamentally been about helping companies move from one place to another. So it's, they call it change programs, or some of them call it transformation programs, basically change. And I, have been deeply involved in that for 20 years. But now that I'm now more doing the public speaking thing, and I'm doing the keynote thing, but I still have that knowledge. And I had this idea that, well, why don't we take the tools and techniques that organizations have been using for years and just give them a little twist, and then make them available to men, to help them in their day-to-day lives, help them in terms of how they are at home, how they are at work, how their relationships are, how they are at work in terms of their performance. And a lot of it's, there's a chap called Alain de Botton who runs an organization called the School of Life. And I think he's right about that. What he talks about is, we'll teach you the things you don't get taught at school. So I think a lot of the things, I think a lot of things that we'll be doing are linked to that, or similar to some of the things he talks about. So for example, relationships is a classic. Things like, how do you have a conversation with a stranger that you may think is attractive or whatever? How do you deal with a relationship when it's in trouble? Who teaches you how to do that? The answer is nobody. How do you express your feelings? Men, really? We're not good at that. So I think all of those things I can help bring that 20 years of experience into the world of the Whole Man Academy, where we can continue to offer that to the corporates, which is obviously part of our strategy. But I'm also really excited about sitting down with people and saying, look, there's a tool here that you can use. And back to that where I started, you've got capability, and if I can give you the right tool to get to it, it can allow you to express it. So I think that's what I can bring specifically from my last 20 years in business.
I know we said that we think we've got a good a mixture of a team at the Whole Man Academy, and hopefully it means that we can cover. I think we said you could have a panel of all the team, and you would hope that you could cover any question that's going to come up, from mental health to science to the arts to journalism to sport. Take your pick of all these things. And you went to the Whole Man Academy dinner. Was it a week ago now? How was that for you? As your experience of that?
It was really good because it was a group of guys, obviously. But I was sat there, and on my right I had a fella from Harrods. Mm-hmm. In front of me I had a father and son.
Yep.
So everybody, all this wild mixture of different people, and I mean, when I talk about this on the stage, I talk about cognitive diversity, which is a bit wanky. It just means we're different.
Yeah.
But when you're different, when you have different people in the room, you see things differently. And so that, therefore, it was a terrific experience. I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot about them. The Harrods chap was talking to the dad, and the dad was thinking, that's interesting. He was turning to his son saying, have you ever thought about a career in retail? And so it was all that sort of sparky, different things were coming through, which I thought was really cool, actually.
Well, that's it. I think that's what the Whole Man Academy dinners, when they resume, when hopefully life mildly returns to normal, whatever normal is, is about. And we said before that the value can often be in getting guys from different backgrounds. We had a real, father son, so you had a real age range. You've got generations sitting there. Guys from either further out of London or in central, in all the different sectors. And actually, I'm the same, where you sit down with these people, and you probably might not ever hang around with these guys, but you all get together for dinner, and they become your friends, and you learn from them, and you connect them to other people.
Yes, I'll tell you the best one example of that I've had in the Whole Man Academy. I was talking to a friend of mine called Nigel, who works at Deloitte, the big consulting and auditing firm, and he has a team of salespeople working for him. And I've been in that environment. I know what they're like. Mm-hmm. And I was chatting to him about it. He's really interested, really turned on by it, because he's into personal development, he's into fitness, all the sort of stuff that we talk about all the time. Then I said, I was talking to the fella who runs the Big Issue. And he went, oh, where are you? And I said, yeah. And he said, do you know what he said? He said, my people who sell Big Issue on the high street are the best salespeople in the UK, right? And he looked at me and he went, what do you mean? He said, this guy says his salespeople in London are the best salespeople, not just in London, all over the UK, are the best salespeople in the UK. And Nigel, he's not stupid, obviously, he's a partner in Deloitte. And he went, oh, that's interesting. I said, how about one time in the near future, you get me your best 10 salesmen, and I'll get the 10 best Big Issue salespeople in the room, and let's see what happens. And he went, bloody hell, what a brilliant idea, right? So he's open-minded enough to see that there could be real value in that. But where else but with the Whole Man Academy would you ever have that sort of opportunity? I mean, gosh, what a brilliant event that'll be when it happens.
That's why it's trying to do something different. And I know when we had an event, it wasn't a Whole Man Academy event necessarily, but it was speaking at Dalesford, which are owned by the people that own JCB. And for them, their market share is hugely on the slanted on the female side. Yeah. So when they ran their first event for men and invited me along to be on the panel with with a couple of chaps, it was just about getting guys together. But we had a real mixture of chaps in the room that were into meditation, into landscape gardening, and we said at the time, one of the guys had 6 kids, and which quite frankly was scary, but we said there was maybe, let's say, 20 guys in the room at that point, and we said, right, it's a Saturday morning, we're out in the countryside, out of interest, where apart from a family gathering or work or a sports event, they're usually 3 that guys are going to, when else have you ever been to something where guys of all shapes, sizes, etc. get together? And it was silence apart from one guy at the back who put his hand up, and I looked up and he said, well, I've been to one of your events. And that was it. And everybody that left said, wasn't it enjoyable? Some had learned about meditation, some had learned about children and skills of dealing with 6 kids. It's hard enough with 2, let alone with 6. It's mind-blowing. But the magic was in those moments where you had that mixture of people together. And generally, a lot of guys, not only do they not talk about their feelings, but for a lot of guys, especially as you get a little bit older, often it can be a little bit self-isolating as a man, because women you find those spaces to get together, whereas guys are a little bit more doing stuff on their own.
That's right. I mean, I guess some of us have a local pub that we go to, and in that environment, sometimes you can get it, but it's very rare. And it's actually, although it's nice to be able to talk about how you feel or what you're experiencing in life, there's a whole practical part of this, Ant, that I think people are missing. I mean, again, go back to a story, I can't help it. I did my first TEDx. The TEDx thing was okay. I mean, I was really proud of it. But the bit that really was important for me was the bit after it. It was the bit where we went to a restaurant, and in that room we had 17 people who'd all just spoken on that red dot, to 3,000 people. And I had feedback from a prison guard in California. I had feedback from an artificial intelligence expert. I had feedback from an opera singer. I mean, what? You just never get that, not even in the pub. So I think sometimes you've got to construct an environment that encourages. I mean, one of my favourite bloggers, she talks about interestingness. And I'm not sure if that's a word, but bringing interestingness into a room and then letting it create. I think that's really exciting, and I think we really have an opportunity with Home Man Academy to get different people into the room, not just all people wearing suits, or all people who are into crystals and meditation, or we're not doing that. We're looking at all people in a particular age group that are just interesting and want some to talk to people, and I think that's a really cool opportunity.
I think that's
a really good thing to offer.
That brings us back to our events, and I know even if you looked at we always say you can't always have famous people at your events, but it helps to kind of increase the amount of eyeballs you get on whatever we're doing. But if you think you go from Leon McKenzie to David Gandy to Rob Rinder to Charlie King, and we've had guys from Formula One and men's cosmetics, and it's that real mixture. From all the guys that you've seen, I know you haven't always been at every single event because sometimes you're speaking elsewhere. But from all the people you've heard from the Whole Man Academy, is there one guy that you've either enjoyed most, or that something he's said has kind of stood out for you?
Well, I was surprised by one, and that was Charlie King from Towie.
Right.
Now, I had heard of Towie, but Towie is not something that's high on my viewing list.
You lie, you fucking love it.
I have a thing, and I know you've heard me talk about this before, but I talk about time well spent.
Yeah.
And watching Towie for me is not time well spent. For other people, it might be, and I don't bother with that. But anyway, so he was on one of the early series of Towie. So when he was on it was quite interesting. When we did the flyer, and we had all these, famous people like Rob Rinder and him from Towie, and then me, and I was speaking at the same event. And I thought, what the hell am I doing here? Am I really going to pull myself down to this sort of, list, sort of celebrity level, which maybe I'm a bit snobby about, but I wasn't really, I thought, no. Anyway, I walk into the room, and there he is sitting, and we get chatting. I didn't know who he was, and I was chatting to him. This is a nice guy. Then he got up, and he was interviewed by Matt and from the Home Man Academy, and or was it you?
No, it's Matt. Yeah.
It was Matt, yeah. And he was one of the most honest, decent, thoughtful, broken, determined blokes I'd ever come across. I mean, this is a guy who, with a room of strangers, said, and I'm not quoting, but you'll know I'm almost quoting, he said, "I am really not comfortable with my sexuality."
Mm.
And in these days of, you know, openness and, you know, honesty about things like sexuality, to say something as delicate and as honest as that, I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was absolutely beautiful. And afterwards, I had a chat with him, and he's a thoroughly nice guy. He's got his troubles, got his challenges, and he now sees the value in that group of strangers who are from all different backgrounds that can help him. And I mean,
Yeah.
so he to me, I have to say all our guests have been great, but I think he to me was the guy that really, there's a realness in him that you know, that it's a bit like, he's quite often hear psychologists talking about, you know, take your mask off. And I think he's taken his mask off. That he took it that off that day anyway.
It was priceless.
It was amazing.
I think with that's the beauty of, I mean, even for me personally, you're meeting people who maybe just because they're in the public eye, you have what you think is an idea of what they're like, who they are, etc.
Yeah.
And then when you meet them, you know, as we all know, they are just normal people. And it's amazing then when you see them in the press, you know, that obviously had Kevin Clifton came to our event, as say David Gandy's, you know, probably the most high profile person. And then when you actually get to see them, speak to them and spend some time with them, you know, a lot of people go, just remember they are just normal people.
Just blokes, yeah.
And we always say every guy that comes to an event is an expert because you're living being a man 24 hours a day. And, you know, if you're doing any other occupation like that, you'll be an expert very quickly. You know, for us, it's great that you have famous people come along, if nothing else, to show that, you know, putting them up on a pedestal doesn't necessarily, you know, certainly doesn't mean they haven't got challenges. And sometimes maybe their challenges are bigger than yours. Because everything they do is magnified in the press, which is always.
And let's face it, we've got bullshit detectors, mate.
Yeah,
we can spot when one of these people, and we've had a couple of them have tried that, but doesn't work. Not in an environment where you're trying to be, you know, you're trying to learn from each other. The BS just doesn't work. Yeah, exactly.
So seeing as we're it's a real strange time at the moment. Going back to, I know we want to we'll increase our newsletter to kind of reach more guys and give them some of our own ideas on what might work if you're either going to be at home or having some, you know, prolonged period away from what is normal life. So we know we've got our one of our videos which is about your morning routine. But how does it work for you at the moment? Because you're at home with kids, you've got a partner working from home as well. Your diary has been, you know, kind of squashed basically. So each day at the moment, what advice would you give to a guy if they're going to be working from home?
Right. I mean, that's a really good question, and obviously a very important question. I think the key thing is to remember how important it is to have a schedule. Because even when, you know, we have, you know, unprecedented disruption as we're having just now, you can still have a schedule. So, for example, I mean, I'm sat here and I'm lucky to have a study, and I can get away from the boys who are running riot downstairs as we speak.
Feral.
But they're feral. They're definitely feral. Well, their father is as well. So not there. But I think having a schedule is the first thing that we should all start to think about. So, for example, I know because of what's happening, I am not going to have, you know, 8 hours a day, you know, to actually, you know, prepare, to think, to meditate, to do all the things that I do normally in my days. Go to the gym, you know, all of this is going to have to change. But what I'm not going to do is I'm not just going to let it happen. I'm not going to let it just become chaotic. You know, there needs to be some sort of structure across that. So personally, and I'll talk about my family in a minute, but personally, what I'm doing, I'm maintaining my morning routine, which is I wake a little bit early. So it's about 6:30. I know that's not early for you, Anton, when you got up to do your gym stuff, but for me that's early.
Yeah.
Every morning I meditate. I do what's called a body scan every morning, and then I read 3 different books every morning. I read one page from a book of poetry by a German poet called Rilke, who I love. I read a book of wisdom written by Tolstoy every day, which I love. I read a quote from the Stoics, which is a thinking group from 3,000 years ago that I read every single day, right? That's my sort of intellectual morning routine. Then I always drink my fizzy water with lemon juice and a pinch of salt, and then I get up and do the boys. That's my sort of morning routine. I'm going to maintain that because the boys are still in bed, so none of that has changed. But I am not going to allow a change in the environment to stop me from doing that. But then I have to think about, okay, so what do we do about the family? Well, at the moment, because my business has been wiped out by the virus, because I've been a professional speaker, there's no speaking going on,
No
certainly not live. Yeah, exactly. So I'm not. So my work has gone that way in terms of delivery, but that doesn't mean I have to stop. In fact, the opposite, I believe, is what should be happening. I'm upping my effort to produce what I call collateral. So I'm doing more videos, I'm doing more articles, I'm doing more social media. But I've gone away from being a salesperson, sales focused, to being, okay, how can I help people? Yeah. I mean, I was always a bit like that. But
that's a mistake that a lot of people are going to make.
Oh, there's just so many emails I get, saying, can you buy this? Can you do that? No, I can't. I'm not getting any money. I've got to think about my family. So that's certainly part of it. But the other part of it is I've got 2 young boys downstairs. So what am I going to do with them? Well, young people need schedule even more than older people. So we've got to think about, so Samantha and I, my partner and I, we're thinking about, okay, so how are we going to structure the week? How are we going to structure the day? And we're not finished with that yet, and we're working on it. But there will be, there'll be morning, there'll be learning, there'll be obviously I'll get them up the chimney, I'll get them in the garden, I'll get them working. Doing all the things I don't want to do, but we need to build it into the day, and I think that's the way to get through this. Because if this lasts, some people are predicting it could last as long as 6 months. If it lasts that long, the benefit that they will get from that will be enormous. We can really enrich their lives by making sure they've got a routine. Letting them run feral, I'm sure they would enjoy it for a little while, but they'll get sick of Fortnite. They'll get sick of watching Netflix. You need to keep these young minds stimulated. And actually, that's quite a good opportunity for me and Samantha and all other parents to stretch their minds a little bit and see what they can do with their kids.
So do you think that the biggest thing for most people is uncertainty at the moment? Because we've never seen this before. We don't really know what's going to happen. I'm not sure if necessarily, no one can honestly say they know exactly what's going to happen, I guess. And for all of us, it is, how much uncertainty can you cope with?
Yeah, I think there is one thing that we can say is certain. We'll fix this, right? We'll sort this particular virus is a virus that we know how to beat. So we will fix the virus, and I think that needs to be in the media more than it is at the moment. People are worried that it's some sort of dystopian science fiction movie. Well, it's not. We'll sort this out. It's a fairly vulnerable virus that we can fix. But, and as you've just hinted at, we're not going to return to what was there before.
Yeah,
it'll be different. I call this, when I'm speaking, the edge of next. We're about to get into a new place that we don't know what it's going to be like, and I don't know. I've got no idea. I mean, I had some. We talked earlier about the relationship with technology. Yes, that will have changed, and I don't think that will ever be the same again. But I think the uncertainty, it's kind of normal. It's kind of they talk about the things in life that are certain are tax and death. Well, uncertainty is another one. You never really know what's coming next, but we don't often. Again, it's not taught at school. It's another one of these school life things. No one ever tells you that. Do you know what's the biggest thing and the most important thing in your life? Luck. You go, whoa, what's that about? But it's really important.
You can't see, and you can't feel, and you can't touch.
And it's not included in the curricula, but it's there. So I think making people aware that we're going to be okay is the first step. But the second step, maybe this will help us deal with that uncertainty. And it was always there. It's just it's just writ large. It's in our faces at the moment. We have no choice. I think that's what happened.
So to wrap it up, I know we've got so much exciting stuff to talk about, but it could be a 12-hour podcast of all the different things. But if you could give guys listening who are probably at the moment going to be at home, like one piece of advice, what would it be?
It's right back to one of my core things, is that we only live for so long. Actually, I can tell you, we live on average for 28,000 days, and you sleep for half of that. You know, you go shopping, you do your gardening, you do your whatever you do. Time is short, and I think that in these difficult times, we need to keep that. I call it the golden KPI, time well spent. I got it from a guy called Tristram Harris, who's a brilliant thinker in the technology space, who come up with that idea in relation to software. But I think that should be applied everywhere. You know, if you go into this next few months with that in your mind and say to yourself, am I spending my time right now? Is doing this podcast time well spent? Well, it is, because I know this podcast is going to go out to the world. People will hear it. And even if they only remember the bit about spending their time well, I'll be happy with it. This has been time well spent.
Yeah, agreed. Well, on that bombshell, I will let you go, and then we'll drag you back soon to talk about nootropics and science and how to be a public speaker and everything else we can think of, and Scottish football. That'll be a very short episode.
You're touching a nerve there. You're touching a nerve.
Yeah.
Don't do it. I'll go Glasgow on you.
Feral, as you said. Right, well, we'll report back, and thank you, Scott, for being on the Whole Man Academy podcast number 2.
It's been a pleasure being here. Thanks very much for asking me, Ant.
See you later.
Cheers.